If you ask a therapist in the school coming from a non-Muslim paradigm, they were going to say safe relationship is consensual relationship, but they won't bring divine guidance. They would say premarital relationship is also safe relationship as long as it's consensual. From our paradigm, that good and bad definition comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our paradigm say even premarital relationship, even though it's consensual, it is still not safe because your akhirah is not safe. So our view, as Sister Thameena said in the beginning, of looking at things about good and bad is very, very different as the modern society who have removed God from almost all the things. So the good and bad become a plastic idea. If you see, and that's where all these isms, including feminism, have come, subhanAllah. If you see the modern society a few hundred years ago have removed God from politics. Now politics have become the most violent. The last 100 years, William Kavanagh says in his book, last 100 years are the most secular, the most anti-God on the face of the history on the earth. And then the last 100 years, despite of the fact are the most secular in terms of politics, the last 100 years are the most violent in politics. He gave the numbers, 70 to 110 million people have lost their life for nationalism wars in just last 120 years. First World War, Second World War, and you have Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on and so forth. So you remove God from anything, eventually good and bad were going to become plastic. IDF soldiers killing 40,000 kids. If you ask them, why are you doing this bad thing? Would they accept that we are doing something bad? No, they will justify morally. So we should not take this lightly, and this is, I really appreciate you bringing this question. For us, this is basically the bottom line. This is the backbone. Who defined what is good and bad for us? For us, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we need to submit to His will and His definition of what is good and bad. Yep.
For that, Dr. Asif. So now I think it's important for us to kind of understand where feminism came from. So let's travel back in time in the 19th century as a European woman. What did life look like for her? If you had a deep desire to learn and go to school, you couldn't. Why? Because you're a woman. If you wanted to own property, you couldn't. Why? Because you're a woman. If you earned money and you wanted to buy something with it, you couldn't, because your earnings would go to your husband. If you were in a marriage that you were forced to enter or under abusive circumstances, you didn't have the right to divorce. Why? Because you're a woman. And if you turned to the church or religion for solace, you were demonized by the Father using biblical verses. Oh, and by the way, we travel a couple centuries further back. During the 15th and 17th century, there were witch hunts. So imagine being hunted down brutally just because you're a woman. So essentially, you had no voice, and it's no surprise that feminism was born as a reaction to the misogyny of European men, and later became refined as an intellectual movement. So the first wave started around the 1840s to 1920s, and the main achievement during this time was the right for women to vote. And by the way, this wasn't all women, it was just European women above the age of 30. They got equal inheritance, forced marriages were now banned, women had the right to control their own money and initiate divorce, some women got the right for education, and although these are legitimate grievances of European Judeo-Christian women, it's clearly not representative, and certainly not representative of the issues that Muslim women face and women of color. It's really hard not to look at how Islam, subhanAllah, secured all these rights of women more than 1,400 years ago. And then we moved to the second wave, which was around 1960s to 1980s. So the backdrop now is post-World War II, and the sexual revolution is at its peak. And it's really hard to separate these two because it had such a huge impact on feminism. The asks of the women were now shifting to reproductive rights. The institution of marriage was completely severed from intimacy and reproduction, and as a result, there were increased rates of fornication, children being born out of wedlock, and the introduction of the birth control pill. And this is a really drastic contrast to the 1950s image of a domestic housewife. We went from that to women marching the streets, burning their undergarments in the name of sexually revolutionizing themselves. The argument of my body, my choice came into being here. The idea that gender is a social construct was also coming into play at this time. And feminism also blatantly attacked the institution of marriage, and motherhood, and parenthood. All of these things were severely looked down upon. Then we have the third wave of feminism. Now there's a disagreement amongst the madhab of feminism, if we can say that, on whether there's a third and fourth wave, but for the sake of discussion, we'll go over both of them today. This wave was a lot more inclusive of the pain points of other women, genders, and ethnicities. They encouraged each type of feminism to figure out their own framework, and they tackled ongoing issues of sexual harassment in the workplace and the shortage of women in positions of power. There was also discussion at this time about, should women be able to work in the adult film industry or in general, and is this something that empowers women or is this something that inherently oppresses women? It's a really interesting quote by Virginia Woolf. She's actually a very big thinker in the name of feminism. In 1929, pay attention to the date, this is just 9 years after the end of the first wave of feminism. She says, the word feminism used to refer to when a woman could make a living for herself. Now women have rights that they didn't have. So now the word is meaningless, and any meaningless word is morally corrupt. SubhanAllah. So now we move on to the fourth wave of feminism, where feminism now means something different to each person. It's a lot more inclusive. In fact, it's so inclusive that we're including biological men that identify as women in sacred women-only spaces. I'm sure you've heard of biological men competing in women's sports, right, under this name. The emphasis in this feminism was also to dismantle the culture of sexual harassment, body shaming. The Me Too movement is definitely a highlight of this particular wave. Shaik, is there anything that I missed on?
No, mashallah. Beautiful, mashallah. Beautifully said, Ustaz Thameena. Just one thing I would correct you. You said that this is intellectual movement, and I would contest that. All these isms, liberalism, conservatism, feminism, or red pill movement right now, they are not intellectual movement. They pretend that they are coming from a rational background, but actually they are very emotional reactions. Even though they portray they are intellectual answer to the call, but they are emotional responses. That's one thing I want to add.
So, subhanAllah, when we hear about all of the misogyny that European women went through, we would see how feminism comes to be. And just so our audience can really appreciate the belief system, can you briefly describe some of the fundamental beliefs of feminism? From my own understanding, some of them seem to be pretty positive. So does Islam agree with those, or are there any differences there?
Yeah. So if we talk about the agreements first of all, the agreement between Islam and feminism will be that women have been oppressed historically. The problem with the feminism where Islam would disagree is Islam would say even men are oppressed, not only women. So it's not one gender. And feminism and red pill movement will going to make you feel that only one gender is oppressed, not other. That's one of the problem, and we'll talk about that. So one of the things where Islam and feminism will agree, Islam will say woman is oppressed and will do something, certain legislation, and feminism will going to say woman is oppressed and they will going to do something. Now, in terms of diagnosis and in terms of prescription, again, in terms of diagnosis and in terms of prescription, that's where feminism and Islam have a radical disagreement. And that's what we are going to, inshallah, speak. So in feminism, the diagnosis is, it is because of male patriarchy, hierarchy, is the responsibility for, let's say, woman is oppressed because male is in charge of woman. And that's patriarchy, and we can talk more about that. In Islam, the reason of woman oppression is something else, and we'll talk about that. Even the solution is very different. The solution or the prescription for feminism to end the woman oppression is representation, identitarianism, and we'll talk about that if you want. But for Islam, it's very different. For Islam, everything have to do with morality. Every issue have to do with moral issue, whether it's this ism or that ism. But obviously, once you make morality plastic, remove officially God from your discourse, then you are going to have these extremes that you will try to lift one gender at the expense of demonizing other gender. If you want, we can talk one by one about major aqidah or assumptions of feminism where disagreement is.
Yeah, if you have maybe 2 or 3 of the key beliefs that feminism stands on, and then how Islam views those.
Yeah, so let's pick one. I would say first, and I guess all the waves, first, second, third, fourth wave, you'll find these 2, 3 assumptions of feminism common, and that's where Islam have a radical disagreement. Feminists' first assumption will be, it's the argument of choice, autonomy, and agency. I'm putting that under one assumption. Okay, actually, let me make this interactive so that our audience can participate. I'm not asking to both of you. Can anyone tell me what comes in your mind when you think about autonomy, choice, or agency in these lines of a feminism assumption? Any idea? That women should have agency, women should have choice, women should have autonomy. That's the number one aqidah of feminism, number one assumption of feminism. And we'll talk about this, that did feminism go too far with their choice argument? And we'll discuss about that. But tell me what comes in your mind. Yes? MashaAllah. That's MashaAllah. MashaAllah, Ustaz Sadia is our AMAL student, MashaAllah. And I guess she have done Masters and MPhil also, MashaAllah, in Islamic Studies. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless her. That's brilliant, MashaAllah. That's what feminist scholarship will say. According to them, agency, if you want to write this down, agency means that a woman is free to make her decision and act on her desire. And if any tradition, any revelation, any God or any male authority is trying to restrict her freedom, women have to show resistance. So 2 things. First, she have a complete right to act on her choice. And second, resistance. If there is anyone try to reduce her freedom, then to resist that. This is agency. This first aqidah of feminism, that women have this. Now the problem with this is that there are few problems. Who is going to define or decide what is good for women and what is bad for women? Or what is good for men and what is bad for men? What are the moral implications of the choices which woman is making will be good for her or what bad for her? That's why Sister Thameena brought the very good point. So if women choose, let's say I'm bringing first problem with the choice argument. If woman chooses to work in the porn industry by her choice, is it good for her or bad for her? She acted on her choice, so according to feminist aqidah, whatever she chooses must be good for her. But you tell me, is it good for her or bad for her if she works in a porn industry? Because you are coming from a moral background, alhamdulillah. But do you know, vast majority of feminists, except few feminists, would say this is good for her? Okay. The other group of feminists who will disagree with them, like postmodern feminists, there are other feminists, they might say, actually, this is exploitative, this is oppressive, women don't know, they are conditioned that it's good for her, so we need to change the society. Still, they won't argue on the choice argument because this is the pillar of feminism. But they would say these women are naive enough, that they are oppressed by the men. So the point is that how do we know that woman's choice is good for her or not? You know, subhanAllah, I usually say this, the feminists who usually say whatever woman is choosing, it must be good for her. Even that comes with the problem of one assumption. And this is a little complicated, try to pay attention. I was trying not to use complicated language, I got 2 reminders. But I will try to make it easy. By saying, I will going to do whatever I choose, and that will be good for me, me, whatever I will choose, it comes with the assumption that whatever I don't choose is not good for me. Right? This is a liberal feminist assumption. And you know what it does? Okay, if a 14-year-old son, mother asks him, wake up for Salatul Fajr. He says, no, I'm feeling sleepy. Does mother have a right to say, Habibi, wake up, wake up, wake up? Or she have to say, no, sleep, sleep. What she should do if she is a good mother? She should wake him up. Maybe he's not choosing to pray, he's choosing to sleep. And sometimes he comes with a liberal assumption that no, I should not wake him up. Let him choose to pray. Because once he will be choosing to pray, then he will pray with the heart. Sometimes this assumption is there, right? This liberal and feministic assumption. But why don't we have this assumption that maybe right now he doesn't want to pray? We have this assumption maybe commanding him to pray, he might have an aversion for the prayer when he will grow old. Maybe change the worldview. Come from the Islamic worldview that maybe he will start appreciating the prayer by changing his habits. But this requires Islamic assumption. We are coming from the feministic assumption. No, let him choose. Let her choose to wear hijab. Okay, let me tell you this. This is also inconsistent. When we are waking our kids for Salatul Fajr, we are saying, no, if they are not choosing to pray, I want them to choose to pray. I don't want to command them to pray. But do you do the same thing when it comes to send them to school? When it comes to school, even if they are choosing not to go, you will going to bring qiyamah for your kids to make sure they go to school. Choice argument doesn't come at a school. Choice argument only comes when it comes to relationship of God. That's the inconsistency. Can Sister Kanwal or Sister Thameena say, when the tax season is coming, I'm not paying taxes because I'm not choosing to? Can you say this, Sister Kanwal? It's my money, my choice. I'm not choosing. No, IRS will penalize you because this choice argument only apply in relationship with God, not with state. So this is, yesterday I was sharing with both of you in the WhatsApp group. How many of you know Jeffrey Epstein? Raise your hand. Okay, say astaghfirullah al-azim. Jeffrey Epstein is a person who is famous for all the evil reasons. But I was looking at his documentary and he took young girls as young as 14-year-old. How much? 14-year-old in the private island, traveled from America to Australia, private island, and asked the big politicians to have inappropriate relationship of zina. When I was looking at this video, you know what I was asking? I was asking, where are the father of these 14-year-old girls? But then I said, wait. The entire society is telling the choice of 14-year-old is better than the obedience to the parents. Then if father or mother will going to say to the 14-year-old, do not go to party, the father and mother will become toxic. That's what we are teaching. So if you are giving input, the same output will come. What I was going to say, in Islam, the biggest difference is not about choice. In Islam, it's about moral choice. That's it. Add moral word. Yes, you have to make a choice as a woman, and Allah will ask you about those choices, but those choices are moral choices. In feminism, morality is removed. You choose with your desire whatever you think you want to do. That's a basic difference. In Islam, we are supposed to shift our choices so that we can bring our choices in the light of Allah, in the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is removed from the modern feminism. Now it's just the choice argument. So basically moral choice versus choice. That's a basic difference.
Okay. Jazakallah khairan. I mean, that's definitely a huge difference between feminism and Islam that we already see on the surface level. You briefly mentioned how overlap between feminism and Islam is that we recognize the oppression of women. But how do we differ in the approach to solve that?
Yeah. So the basic difference in terms of recommending the solution, first of all, we have to agree that women are being oppressed even back in the days and today. Even 7th century Arabia, women were oppressed. Yes or no? if you have a male child and female child, there are some tribes who have the habit, not all the tribes because society will going to become dysfunctional, this is a misunderstanding, but some tribes will going to bury daughters alive. You know this, right? This is zulm on women, absolutely. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came, Quran came, it addressed universal issues. بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. Quran addresses this. Women did not get inheritance, marriage issues. Rasulullah ﷺ came and addressed that, so that women got the marriage issues. So there were women oppression in the 7th century, Quran addresses, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ addressed. And even in 21st century, we see women oppression is going on. I know we discussed this in class, but again, not the AMAL students, but I'm just asking you, do you know the domestic violence rates today? In 2022, just tell me how many women are being killed by their partners in America. I'm not talking about Pakistan, Afghanistan, Saudi. I'm talking about United States of America. Oh, sorry, America. Yeah, tell me. Give me any numbers. How many? I'm sorry to have this discussion, but we need to be firm and clear about the oppression on women, right? Before we can talk about difference in the approaches, how to solve that. Give me any number. In 2022, how many women were killed by their intimate partners, let's say male partners, including husband, and many times it's not husband because of the family dynamics. Tell me. 30? You are very generous with these men. I'm telling you, there are a lot more. Increase the number. Only 45 in 2022? 5,000. 4,900 something. Can you imagine this? Okay, how many domestic violence happening every single minute in America in 2022? Give me a number. Every single minute. Which doesn't include murder, but don't Google it, please. I see some of you pull out your phone. Okay, 20 per minute. Okay, by the way, this includes both men and women, but most of them are women. So there is oppression going on women. How to address it is different. What we will say that we have feminism waves for 100 years, and it's not helping neither men or women. And now we have radical movements. It's not helping men or women. Now we have masculinity crisis, and all of these crises of gender started when we removed divine guidance, even from Muslim majority countries, and now you see social crisis, economic crisis, political crisis. The moment you go far away from divine guidance, that will going to happen. Okay, now what's the difference between Islam and feminism in addressing this as a solution? Feminism will going to say all these problems which are happening of domestic violence is happening because of patriarchy. It's happening because of patriarchy. Should we explain what patriarchy is? Okay. Where is patriarchy? Okay, actually there is a social system in which men hold primary power and are predominantly in roles of leadership. This is the anthropologist's definition of what patriarchy is. Patriarchy defined in multiple different ways. If you are saying man is the head of the household, then this patriarchy, as a Muslim, I don't have any problem in addressing that. Okay, this patriarchy is good. Men are leaders and caretakers of the house. But then feminist scholarship took this word, and now this word is very controversial. If you will use patriarchy in gender studies department, it means كَأَنَّهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ that the day of judgment will come in that classroom. Because now feminist scholarship have turned this, and they would say this is a value-laden term, which means men are in the leadership position making rules to benefit them and harm women. Is that clear? So for them, patriarchy comes with the assumption because man is taking care, leader of the household, it's a privilege, and they are benefiting themselves and harming women. But do you see a problem with this? This will going to give the birth to the idea men are garbage. Because if men are inherently oppressive, and if they are doing only scheming to benefit them and harming women, it means we need to do something to take that power back so that we can eventually have less oppression on women. All based on assumption. Instead of that, you could have said, okay, these are cases of domestic violence, but it does not mean that all the men are abusive and oppressive. There are some good men and there are some bad men. So instead of making a moral issue, you are just trying to say all the men are oppressive. And what it does, actually does something very subtle. When you are saying that all the men are benefiting themselves, it means they are harming women. You know what is happening here? If you pay attention, something very subtle is happening. You are saying if man will benefit himself, he cannot benefit women. It means in feministic discourse, our benefits, men and women benefits, are always competitive. In Islamic discourse, men and women benefits are not competitive, they are complementary. This is important. So they would think, by the way, if you read some postmodern feminists, they would say this. You know, some feminists who are going to say pornography is bad. What's their argument when they don't believe in Allah? Tell me. What do you think? Actually, not you. Tell me. When they don't believe in Allah, why some feminists believe that pornography is bad? Tell me. They would say because men gets benefit, that's why it's bad for women. Did you see something? So whatever is beneficial for men, it must be harmful for women. That's the assumption which comes with this patriarchy belief. Did you see how harmful this is for society? You can never bring gender solidarity if you believe in this kind of assumption. There will always be gender conflict, gender hostility. And by the way, red pill movement, the toxic masculinity movement, uses the same argument to demonize women. Use same argument that women are benefiting from this so-and-so culture, it means that actually it is harmful for women. So if I was talking to one of the, in Maryland, one of the young guys about masculinity, and they said why Islam asks men to provide to the wife, why not the other way around? And because women are benefiting from men's hard work and in terms of providing, they are coming from the same mindset. If woman is benefiting, it means it's harmful for the men. Similarly, feminism will make you think if it's benefiting men, it must be harmful for the woman because it's competition. When we see, it's not about men or women have a selfish approach, have a self-centric approach. Rather, we see ourselves as a creation of Allah, who created us. He given few different roles which are complementary in nature, so that eventually we can fulfill one picture. It's very different belief. So this modern patriarchy, even though it's a controversial term, is a solution recommended by feminism, that the backbone of the oppression of the woman, according to feminism, is patriarchy. And when you believe in this, one of the problems is you will start doubting Allah. You will start doubting Islam. Because Islam does tell you that, let's start, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is our leader, yes or no? How the patriarchs will, the people who demonize patriarchy will going to believe this? He was a man. Khulafa, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, they were men. Furthermore, your imam who is going to lead you in prayer is men. And then furthermore, your father is a man. Your husband is a man. And vice versa for red pill movement. Your wife is a woman. Aisha is a woman. Maryam is a woman. So the idea that we are oppressed because of patriarchy, we need to become independent. Have you heard this in feminist discourse? You have to become independent? Independent of whom? Independent of Allah? No. Independent of men? No. Because if I were going to become independent of every man, within 60-70 years there will be no human being on the face of the earth. And if I were going to become independent of every woman as a man, there will be no human being on the face of the earth. Literally, we are dependent on each other as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us. As a father, I'm dependent on my wife. So our relationship also, subhanAllah, so they will focus on patriarchy, and natural solution will be remove these hierarchies. And that will take you to the doubt or skepticism which Islam gave. Islam talks about hierarchies. Islam says, let's say, Islam says, Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. Husband will be asked on the day of judgment about the treatment he had with his wives and with his kids. So that's one of the issue which will going to happen when you believe in patriarchy. You say all the hierarchies need to be removed. We all are coming from equality paradigm, and you will have understanding, you will have problem in understanding of all the ayat and ahadith which talks about these issues. So yeah, this is one of the problem in this belief of patriarchy and removal of hierarchy.
So just so I understand, you said feminism will make you think that the oppression accepts that there is oppression of women, but it will say that the root cause is it's a moral issue. Right?
Yeah, so it's some men who are abusive, harmful, weak in iman. It's the issue of morality of those men, not entire gender. And if you say all the men are garbage, or the red pill will say all the women are garbage, you're basically saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not al-Hakim. When we say Allah is all wise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created men and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created women, then you know subhanAllah what kind of argument we are heading towards. So yeah, in Islam it's a moral issue, in feminists it's a patriarchy issue, and that's where the problem comes.
So we also usually hear this word toxic. Has anyone heard the word toxic when we're talking about feminism or masculinity? I'm seeing some nods. Okay, so we do have a definition up here, but just so we can understand from an Islamic perspective, we can hear that things like hierarchy can be toxic, where if you have your religion control you, or your parents or male scholars control you, then you know that's toxic. So how can we understand and use the word toxic as Muslims? And I think this is our last question.
Yeah, 8:25, 8:26 we'll finish inshallah. It's a very important question, very, very important question, because the way we are using language makes a huge impact. Like safe relationship. You can teach your Muslim kids about safe relationship, but if you don't teach them about Islamic paradigm, they will have different conceptualization, right? Similarly, the word toxic. For I think you got this translation from some research from Google. So Google says harmful attitudes or behaviors that perpetuate inequality or harm marginalized groups. This is a toxic definition of toxic. Let's start with that, because it's coming from very different paradigm. Let's go one by one. Harmful attitudes. How do we define what is harmful? Whatever takes us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's harmful. If the husband is doing something which is taking his wife away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would say this is harmful, aka toxic. But if father is asking his daughter, Habibati, pray Salatul Fajr, and Habibati is saying, no, it's my body, my choice. And father said, no, just pray. She might say, you are toxic, because it's a male patriarchy, asking me to do something, hierarchy. In Islam, we say, no, this is nice parenting. But therapist, who is coming from a different paradigm, he would say this is toxic parenting. A father and a mother have a right to say to the son and daughter, don't go to this party. A therapist might say toxic parenting, that you're not letting them find their true self. So is it clear? Our definition of harm comes from Quran and Sunnah. That's extremely important. Second, perpetuate inequality. Inequality in what? And we can discuss this after Salatul Maghrib. But one of the other aqidah and assumptions of feminism is about equality argument. First of all, the feminists in and of itself have a disagreement, their scholarship, that are men and women equal? And if they're equal in what? Biologically, they are not equal, according to half of the feminists. The other half say gender is just a social construct, so they will take you to LGBTQ route. And then second, psychologically, emotionally, all you can see in men and women, they are different, unequal. And we should celebrate their inequality. If you see in Islam, you read Kitab al-Hayd, you will celebrate their inequality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives specific commands to the women which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't give to the men. But subhanAllah, this entire idea of men and women are equal have taken us to different direction. We say that men and women are created equal, they will be rewarded or punished equally in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a creation, they are equal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but their roles and responsibilities are based on justice, not based on equality. And sometimes their roles are same, which is equal. Sometimes their roles are unequal. Like women have to cover more than men, because Islam gave more priority to modesty. Women have to pray at certain area, men have to pray at certain area. Men have to provide to the woman and not the other way around. So this is inequality we see, and we should celebrate this inequality. So this definition comes from a very anti-theistic, very, very ungodly background. We should not take for us, toxic definition will be anything which takes you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a guy is asking our sister in college to let's have zina, this is toxic. This is toxic. Is that clear? And so our definition of toxic is extremely different and radically different than the modern definition of toxic.
Jazakumullah khair. We're going to break for Maghrib, and afterwards we're going to talk more about gender interaction between men and women in Islam and equality and things like
Yep,
that.
inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, sisters, welcome back. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So prior to the salah, we were talking about whether men and women are equal in Islam. And Dr. Asif touched on the fact that in Islam we have complementarian roles and that our inequality should actually be celebrated. Shaik, could you elaborate on this point and how we're different biologically, psychologically, and spiritually?
So again, okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, do you really want me to elaborate that how biologically and psychologically we are unequal? I think it's undeniable fact. The people who are saying we are equal biologically, they have to bring the evidence. They are against the revelation, they are against the empirical science, they are against the rational science, and I don't know what they are following. So clearly there are biological differences, there are psychological differences. No one denies that. Actually, it will be harmful if you were going to treat two unequal creations equally. And you have to understand this, that in Islam, we say that certain laws are equal for both men and women. Like both men and women have to stay away from zina, right? Both men and women have to stay away from drinking wine. Both men and women have to pray 5 times a day. Then there are certain laws which are exclusively for the woman, which is they have to cover more than men. There are a slight layer of restriction on marriage on women more than men. So there are few women have to pray in a different gathering than the men, and then there are some legislation given by God which is exclusively for the men, which is exclusively haram for the men. Can you tell me? Oh, there is no such thing which is haram for men in Islam. It's patriarchal. No, there is. Tell me. Men have to go to mosque. Okay, it's some scholars say it's obligatory. The others say it's emphatically recommended. For women, there is no obligatory act to come to masjid. It's optional for women. If she will come, she will get reward. But for men, they have to go. But in terms of haram, what is haram for men but not haram for women? Mashallah, gold, someone said. Okay, gold. Women can wear, men cannot. See, inequality. Men cannot wear silk, women can wear silk. Men have to provide to the wife, wife doesn't have to provide to the husband. If man doesn't provide the wife, it's haram by all these scholars. So there are exclusive cases also for one gender, and then there are both mutual cases for both the genders. To say to end the oppression of women, it is because of patriarchy, it is because of inequality, so we should bring equality. That's one of the problems, that you were going to mix and you're going to get confused about Islamic legislation. But one of the other things which will happen with the woman herself, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, and I don't know how can I explain that. Okay, let's say feminist assumption right now says man is here in social political power and woman is here. And by the way, this is the same argument Red Pill movement uses. Red Pill movement say woman is here, man is here. Just this I'm telling you, because once you have gender-centered worldview, you will going to lift one gender at the expense of other. If feminists are saying men are here, women are here, and if we need to create equality, it means women have to come where? At the level of men. Did you see something? Now the success of women according to feminists is what man is getting. So the reference, okay, simple question my sisters. Our reference point in Islam is Allah or men? Allah. In feministic discourse, you will always compete with men is getting this, we should be getting this. So basically, you devalue womanhood, you devalue femininity because you are consistently comparing yourself with men. Do you see a problem with this? And this is what equality brings in terms of the aqidah or assumption, that you will consistently say, we have to remove men from social and political power, then we are going to make an egalitarian society, and then hopefully our problems will be solved. Guess what? The problems are getting worse at every level, including at the family and marriage and social level, so things are not working. So yeah, this is basically, I would say, in a nutshell, what equality argument is. There can be other things can be said, but I think that's enough. In Islam, it's very obvious. Allah says, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, that men and women are not equal. Male can never be like a female, can never be like a male. And in this, by the way, in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is elevating the status of female, if you know the context. Allah is talking about which woman here, that a woman cannot be equal to a man? Maryam. Maryam's mother is giving birth to Maryam alayhi salam. She was expecting a baby boy. She made an intention, I was going to give baby boy to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ends up getting a baby girl. Allah named her Maryam. And Allah says, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, male child is not like a female child. You know why this is important? Just like a subtle point here. Here Allah gave a female child, Maryam, who is going to give birth to Isa. So the next progeny will also be a prophet. Next progeny will also be righteous. Along with this story, the story of Yahya is mentioned. When Zakaria got Yahya, there is no mention of the progeny of the Yahya. Did you see something? Male is not like female. If a female child is born and you work really hard in the nourishment of the female child, your entire generation will be saved. You will get Isa from that female child. But from the male child, you can just save the present generation. That's Yahya, because no one knows about the next generation of Yahya. This very subtle point about the elevation of the status. So again, we don't believe in equality. For us is not the gauge. For us, justice is the gauge. Sometimes we go with the equality between the man and a woman in gender roles. Sometimes we go with inequality and we celebrate those inequality. Like mother have 3 times higher rate of service than father. Right? About the Sahaba's hadith. Similarly, where the paradise lies, mother's feet or father's feet? Feet of the mothers. Similarly, if you raise 2 daughters or 3 daughters, all these are hadith are not to demonize men. And men should not feel that they are demonized. It's just one gender is being given priority because of their sacrifices. And we have to be just celebrating those differences. Yeah, that's basically the answer.
So you briefly touched on how the feminist movement and the red pill movement, they just have gender extremes where they have warring views.
Yeah.
One is against women and the other one is against men. So in Islam, what should be the gender dynamics between men and women?
This is a very important question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says in Surah Tawbah, I don't know which ayah, I think it's Surah ayah 72, 73. Allah says, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. Believing men and believing women are protective friends of each other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, no Maulvi or Shaik is saying, no Imam is saying, who is saying? Allah, that believing men and believing women are friends of each other, and especially awliya. Awliya means protective friends. So this basically means that they will protect each other. Like for example, this is a relevant example I will give. It's a duty of Muslim brother. If I will see, if one of our sisters' hijab is being pulled in an IANT parking lot, it's my responsibility, whether they are related to me or not, to jump in so that to help our sister, protective friend. And they help each other in MSAs. They help each other in different forums. One of the interesting thing is about the word awliya. Allah says men and women are awliya of each other, protective friends of each other, wali of each other. Imam Qurtubi rahimahullah commented on this ayah and he says, Allah says here that men and a woman who are believing, they are protective friends of each other. It means in their hearts are loving each other, and in their hearts they have a unity for each other. Think about it. So if you are husband and wife, you are friends of each other. You wake up each other for tahajjud, and that's what we know from the hadith also of Abu Dawud. You are reminding each other about the responsibilities and about the roles. If you are a community member, you should remind each other without looking at, okay, if you are from this gender, you should not remind me. This is our way to go. But the problem is, now Allah is saying believing men and believing women should have a relationship of protective friend. If any man-made ideology divides us, create hatred in our heart for the opposite gender, it means that it's trying to create gender hostility instead of gender solidarity. It's not coming from Islam, it's coming from man-made ideologies. That's why feminism or red pill movement started from a right cause. Maybe they want to do something good for one gender, but because of lack of divine guidance, they became so radical, both the genders, that eventually it harmed the relationship of both men and women. So I personally believe that feminism and red pill movement both have harmed both the genders. And the statistics are very obvious in that. So our relationship in Muslim community from Islamic perspective should be a protective friends. But what about Dr. Asif? You know that some Muslim sisters are being abused and oppressed in Muslim community by their husbands. Absolutely, who's denying that? The first thing we started that actually we recognize the fact. But the problem is the solution. We have to have accountability. We have to make sure that that woman, that sister gets justice. We have to make sure that brother, whoever does the oppression, we hold them accountable. But at the same time, we don't have to take feminist or red pill movement that all men are garbage, all men are oppressive. This divides us. Have accountability, but you are part of one ummah and ummah of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We are not letting any man-made ideologies or isms to divide us so that we can have this gender hostility between each other. So Islam says we are part of one ummah. Address the issue. If some men have weakness, you have to address it. You have to help them, but do not take your separate clique and make a different bubble and then have this patriarchy versus matriarchy discussion.
Yeah. We hear about the cases of a husband abusing his wife in the name and spiritually abusing it by using ayahs of the Quran and Hadith. So how do we reconcile this?
Absolutely. So as I said in the beginning, it's an emotional reaction. Feminism is going to say this, and that's why I'm sympathetic to the feminism cause, not to the feminism solution. Feminism cause was to address the women oppression. That's what Islam did. But the solution, I'm not a big fan of any of the isms, including feminism. So Muslim women who turn to feminism, one of the reasons is that some of you, may Allah protect all of you. Wallahi, one of the fear I have 2 daughters, Maryam and Fatima. One of the fears I have for Maryam and Fatima both is that they should get the spouse who will respect them. And at the same time, uqsimu billah, I have the fear that this entire society should not corrupt Fatima and Maryam's mind, that they won't give due respect to their husband. Equally, same fear I have. Because these isms are impacting us, these man-made ideologies are impacting the marital relationship. But Muslim women who turn to feminism, one of the most common reason, as you said, is domestic violence. Maybe she have seen something in her family, if not in her personal life, from the friends. And usually, when do you hear these kinds of issues? When husband and wife are having good relationship, they don't share usually, and they should not share, by the way. I don't like the idea of sharing wherever you're going to vacation on Facebook. But whenever our cousin or our khala or auntie is going through a domestic violence, entire family will know. This creates a pessimistic mindset that, and if the guy is praying, let's say Jummah Salah, if he have a beard, then immediately what clicks in your mind? Islam. Because that's what feminism wants you to think. We are saying this is because of lack of Islam. This oppression is happening because it's lack of Islam. Feminism will want you to think it's because of Islam. So that's one of the problem. Feminism is attractive to those sisters who are going through oppression, and they don't listen from the member about the women oppression and the Islamic solution. So they would turn to feminism for the solution. Similarly, like red pill movement, there is a masculinity crisis. The male is committing more suicides than female. It's on CDC report. If we won't address and nourish this prophetic masculinity among our young men, then they will going to resort to some of the influencers who are teaching them harmful masculinity concepts which are harmful for men and harmful for women. So these things become, these feminism and these other isms become attractive when you are going through an oppression and you don't see from Mimbar or from the Muslim community a response. But there are other reasons also why Muslim women turn into feminism, or some Muslim men also turn into feminism. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates the gender of femininity not by equality but by the femininity of itself. If femininity and masculinity are not equal, they are both separate genders and we need to celebrate that. But one of the other reasons why sisters are inclined towards feminism and some brothers is that it's because of their ignorance of Islam, that Islam gave this solution they don't even know, and they are naturally attracted towards the feminism. And there are multiple reasons, but I would say in Islam we say fix the issue. This is a moral issue. Feminism will going to say just solve this issue by abolishing the entire hierarchy. So they have a radical approach, like radical movement, and that's why it's harming women in most of the social life, as radical movement is harming the men as we speak.
Could we also say that perhaps as a Muslim community we need to be more proactive in holding people that immorally do these things accountable, so that it becomes an example?
Absolutely. I think as I said this before, that when Muslim community doesn't address these issues properly about the domestic violence or the oppression on women, then they will naturally feel attracted towards these man-made ideologies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Prophet Muhammad, something interesting. Okay, I'll tell you a hadith and I want you to do the explanation. Whoever will do the explanation, I will give my book as a gift, inshallah. Fatma, can you go into my office and bring a book, any book, gender interaction or rainbow, inshallah. Okay, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, explain me the hadith. He says, unsur akhaka zaliman or mazluman. Help your brother or sister, whether they are oppressor or oppressed. What does this hadith mean? Yeah, no, I know you know this. Apart from AMAL students and apart from Sister Sadia, tell me. No, Sister Sadia, please. Yes. Let me ask her. Okay, tell me. Yeah.
To help the oppressor get better, and then to help the oppressed not be oppressed.
MashaAllah. You, Fatma, give her a book. But did you see something, sister? We have to help the oppressed by helping her or helping him, but we also help to who? Oppressor, preventing him or her from zulm. Feminist, we're going to have a problem in understanding this hadith, because feminists were going to say we have to demolish, we don't have to help the oppressor, we have to demolish the patriarchy. Secondly, Rasulullah used general language, unsur akhaka zaliman wa mazluman, oppressor and oppressed, because sometime you are going to have male oppressor and female oppressed. Sometimes you have other way around, right? We have in the Quran example of Fir'aun and his wife was Asiyah. Similarly, on the other way around, we have sometimes practicing Muslim and their wives, like Lut alayhi salam and his wife, Nuh alayhi salam and his wife. So whoever is doing oppression, as a Muslim community, we need to stand firm and help them. Otherwise, they will be pushed towards these ideologies, especially when these ideologies are taking our young sisters. I think as an imam, as a Muslim community, we should be cognizant of the fact that we should address these issues. And even for the young male, if they are struggling with something, we should be addressing it. And we should not be afraid of getting cancelled from one gender or other gender, because we have tried this political correctness, it's not helping us. So it's time to be politically incorrect at this point, inshallah.
So you've been mentioning that feminism has harmed both genders, toxic masculinity has harmed both genders. So since Sister Thameena kind of talked about the waves of feminism, and we saw the rights that women were given as a result, have there been, or can you elaborate on the negative repercussions of the feminist women movement to women specifically and to society as a whole?
I think first of all, if you say feminist movement is all about freedom, right? Choice. Did women get freedom? Yes and no. Who is talking about who? If you're talking about, okay, I'll give you a few statistics. Second wave of feminism came in 1960. And second wave of feminism basically highlighted, as Sister Thameena said, anti-marriage, anti-motherhood. Germaine Greer, I would recommend her. I don't like her, FYI, because of the things she said in her book. But read her book to see how it impacted our community. In 1960, she wrote a book and she said this: housewives are in a concentration camp, and they need to come out. Did you see something? Demonizing language for the women who choose to stay in home for the kids, going against our own paradigm of choice. Did you see something? Okay, how it have harmed women? Before we can talk about the religious and spiritual harm. Post 1960. Let's take 1960, second wave of feminism came, freedom, sexual liberation, freedom, equality. Okay, let's start with that. In 1969, in England, do you know how many kids were born without marriage? Percentage? In England, in 1969, how many kids were born without marriage? 9%, 9, okay? In 2019, same England, 51% kids are born without marriage. Is this the freedom we were teaching our men and women? And you see that second wave of feminism disconnected marriage and intimacy with marriage and family. This is the disaster, because you tell me, for a toxic men, for a predatory men, they will have a field day if a woman will say, let's have a relationship without marriage. Because it's women who have to face the burden of different kind from this relationship. Men can go away. So it's toxic men like Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein who got benefit from all these things. So it harmed women, it harmed the family, and then the biggest harm, because for us the biggest harm is the harm of akhirah. This feminism start giving you doubts about Islam, because you start doubting Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as a man. You start doubting Quran and Sunnah, where it doesn't speak about equality, even though our paradigm is different. And then you start even doubting Allah. Well, maybe Allah is not just, because justice according to you comes from your feministic paradigm. Instead of changing those paradigms, you're trying to change Quran and Hadith. That's why feminism can also create doubt. Like any other ism, liberalism can create doubts in the mind. You know, many times we have workshops in our community for atheism and agnosticism. That's an intellectual thing. All these isms, liberalism, feminism, conservatism, red pill movement, they are actually the trigger movements of all these doubts. That you would say, why Islam doesn't fit into this intellectual trend of liberalism or feminism? You should ask the other way around. When Allah is Al-Hakim, Quran and Hadith, why the intellectual trend is not fitting there? There's something wrong with this intellectual trend. So feminism can also give a spiritual harm. So I would say, if you are trying to adopt feminism because it addresses women oppression, then I would say we already have a better solution that's divine, and that's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do we need any man-made ideologies which have not proven from any empirical data it have helped either of the genders? So that's my response.
Just to recap, the big question of tonight, which is, as a Muslimah, can I carry this label of feminism? Like, can I identify as a Muslim and a feminist at the same time?
So I am not a woman. So if I will answer this before you both will answer, then someone will going to post, toxic imam doesn't let the woman speak about a feminine issue, even though we just clarified that for us it's a moral issue. If I will do something wrong, my wife have a complete right to correct me, ad-dinun nasiha. I cannot say, my wife, you are a woman, you should not advise men. No, that's arrogance. If I'm saying you are a male, you should not advise us, this is arrogance. So you should tell me before I can say, what do you think? If someone asks you the same question, what will be your response, both of you, before I can say?
I would say that, alhamdulillah, the deen is perfect, and the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided me is perfect. And so I don't need to go to any man-made ideology for that. And I can harms that exist. And I could also clarify the differences between when people bring up the fact that, oh, how come Muslim countries are always brought synonymously with the word oppression and Muslims? This is clearly a blatant attack on Islam, right?
Yeah.
So I would definitely say that I don't need feminist ideology personally.
Yeah, I would say that what we need is true practice of Islam. If we see from the 7th century that that the women at that time had all of these oppressions, they didn't have those rights, but Islam gave them those rights, then we know that proper practice of Islam will give women those rights, and we don't need to rely on these man-made ideologies.
No, mashallah. Mashallah. Wallahi, this is so beautiful. That came from you, so it will look more powerful to our sisters than me. But I'll add, just to compensate a little bit deficiency, is that my answer is same as both of you said. But if one sister identifies that, no, I became Muslim because Islam gives so much rights to women, and I'm feminist from my childhood, so I identify as a feminist Muslim, I would say to the sister, not on first day, no, don't do this. I would say, mashallah, kudos. Just like if someone says, I became Muslim because Islam talks about social justice, I'm a social justice warrior, I'm a very liberal Marxist Muslim, I won't confuse them with these isms on the first day. Similarly, conservative. Similarly, Andrew Tate. Anyone who accepts Islam, the first day I won't confuse them. Is that clear? But then, slowly and gradually, I would pull them off by using my wisdom and mentorship that Islam doesn't need these isms, and we will going to practice organic Quran and Sunnah, and we will going to remove these impact of these isms slowly and gradually. So this is just the balanced reminder that we should not negate immediately. If a sister identifies as a feminist Muslim, we should be very wise, because as you said, you know more than me that there is an attraction to the feminism because of the domestic violence. But at the end of the day, there is no compatibility between feminism and Islam. If there is something similar, it's because of accident and they have reached from a very different intellectual route. Primarily, they both are extremely different. So Islam doesn't need any man-made ideology.
I think that's a really beautiful and powerful reminder to practice empathy whenever we have dialogues about these controversial topics, right? Because oftentimes when we do, we get so emotional about it that we end up leaving the other person either feeling less than, judged, and that just makes the person close off even more. So
Absolutely.
when we have these discussions, inshallah, it's like the Shaik said, it's important to have wisdom and mentorship and really understand where the person is coming from and meeting them in the middle ground.
Absolutely.
Inshallah, we're going to go ahead with Q&A. So we do have the QR code here if anyone has a question that was not answered. So to start off, we have a couple questions that are talking about how when the European women were oppressed without rights, did Muslim women at that time, did they have their full rights, or how were they treated in that era?
MashaAllah, that's a very good question. Very good question. So when the first wave of feminism was coming and they were abusing the biblical text to oppress the European woman and the witch hunt you mentioned, you know the status of the Muslim woman? When was the first woman which was allowed in University of Cambridge? Any idea? As Sister Thameena said, women were not allowed to get education unless they are very rich. She said this, right? When was the first woman that got admission in Cambridge University? Any idea? That's Harvard. Cambridge 1869. Harvard was 1946. In Harvard University until 1945, women are not supposed to go. In America, in Massachusetts. Okay, Yale University, famous Yale, Sheikh Yasser Qadi did their PhD from Yale, right? When woman was entered in Yale to get education, when she was allowed? Any idea? 1969. Columbia, 1982. Okay, think about it. In 20th century, they are still thinking whether women should have a political say or not, whether woman is a separate entity or a part of husband after marriage. That was a discussion in Europe. I can give you references to this. Take 1,000 years back. This is 20th century. oppression on women in the West, take 1,000 years back. This is 20th century. How much 1,000 years back? 10th century. Take 1100 years back actually, 9th century. Who built the first university on the face of the earth? And that is Muslim woman. Fatima in Morocco. Not this Fatima, my daughter, but other Fatima. Did you see something? Okay, go to Spain, Andalus. We can discuss one day Andalus. I didn't discuss this in the class. Do you know in the Muslim Spain, when Muslims were there from 8th century to 14th century, 15th century, there were Muslim women who were educated for the writing, and they will get the contract, they will work from home to write the books in 11th and 12th century when the Europe was going through dark ages, so-called dark ages. Can you imagine this? This is what Islam gave. In Islam, if you want khula, separation from your husband's oppression, can you go anytime to the Imam and Qadi to file a khula? The answer is yes. You can prove the oppression, any harm is happening, and Imam and Qadi will help you to seek separation. Until 1920 in Europe, women didn't have a right to go to a court without her husband to get the separation. You know, in American culture, or in the Western, even in Hindu culture, a woman will carry the name of her husband. Have you seen this after marriage? So let's say Fatima, Asif, now Fatima is going to become something else if she's following American culture. But when we say Aisha, do we say Aisha Muhammad or Aisha bint Abi Bakr? Bint Abi Bakr. Because in Islam, you are an entity. You're not ownership of your husband. Right? In the Judo-Christian belief, they have some even abuse of the text also. They would say you become the ownership of, you come from the ownership of your father to the ownership of your husband. So that's why you have to carry his name. In Islam, we don't have this jahiliyyah. If you get it just because of the culture, not because of this, then it's a different story. But we do not encourage or say this is recommended. Did you see the difference? So there's so many differences. We know, subhanAllah, there's so many female companions who were knowledgeable enough. SubhanAllah, there was one, this is, I'm not feminist, but this is just the comment by one of the scholars. He said, you know, in hadith sciences, there are male narrators and there are female narrators. So one of the scholars said that when you scrutinize male narrators, you will find some liars. But he said, I cannot find any female narrator of the hadith who is a liar. This tells you what? Scholarship of the woman when Europe was going through dark ages. So we can talk about this hours and hours, how Muslim gave rights to women when, but this is defeatist mentality with the Muslims we have right now, is that everything which is coming from the West must be good and our values are just garbage. And this defeatist mentality is actually taking us nowhere in this world right now.
So a follow-up to that, or part of that was, if we're looking at those Muslim countries right now, it seems that men are being deprived of rights. So how do we reconcile that Islam and feminism was taking women rights?
Yeah. No, there is honor killings. There are, I personally know that, because I'm from Pakistan originally, I know in some villages in Pakistan, the woman doesn't get the inheritance right. And this might be common for some others. And these guys might have a beard. So that's one of the problems. SubhanAllah, sometimes they might have appearance of Musa, but they might have heart of Fir'aun. But what the feminists will make you think this is because of Islam. Actually, this is because of lack of Islam, because Islam talks about proper distribution of inheritance. So I would say, if you want to test, Sister Kanwal, Dr. Zakir Naik actually gives this example, I'll bring it up. If you want to test the car, will you test by reading the manual or by driving it or by asking someone who haven't learned how to drive, okay, drive the car and I'll see if you'll get into accident or not. So if we have to see the beauty of the Islam, either see the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or study yourself. If you see one random country which is very conservative, not Muslim, because conservative doesn't mean that you are Muslim, because you're trying to conserve the culture, then don't use that as an Islamic benchmark. That culture have so many issues. They need to help women in those issues. So again, one of the problem is don't look at those countries' benchmark and standards and gauge. Islam teaches this. They're seriously struggling. I have traveling a lot. I've been traveling a lot for the last few years. I know there are certain countries where hijab is just part of the culture. Even in America, by the way. Hijab is just part of the culture. The sister might not pray 2 times a day, but she's wearing hijab. Right or wrong, it's a different story. We can talk about that. Guy have a long beard, but he doesn't pray 2 times a day. So sometimes you see ritual, you will say that this is because of his Islam, but this is because of his lack of Islam. So just like we need Islam right now in the West, even in these Muslim countries, they need Islam. They need to come out there conserving their culture, and they need to give stand up for the oppressors, against the people who are oppressed. Yep.
So on the topic of hijab, how do we navigate sisters who refuse to wear their hijab? Is this a symptom of feminism, as women are mandated to wear hijab in Islam?
So when we say mandated, first of all, you have to understand, the word force is a negative word. So let's use the word, I like the question, word mandated is a better word, or commanded is a better word. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's take this from one route and then we'll go to other route. Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ahzab that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides anything for a believing man and for a believing woman, أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ, then this believing man and this believing woman whom Allah have decided does not have any choice in that matter. Our choices as man and woman are taken away because Allah has decided, because of our belief. We surrender to His decision making, that He knows better than us. Following? So if He have decided for Muslim men to provide to his wife or Muslim woman to cover her body in particular way, as a believing man and a believing woman, we submit our choices to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, can as a Muslim father or Muslim mother, we command our kids, our daughters to wear hijab? Absolutely, it have to be done in obviously a loving way, but it have to be done. But what about commanding? What about enforcing? Everyone enforces, it's just a matter of how much. I'm sorry to give you this example, but I cannot walk in the streets of Dallas downtown without any clothes. I need to cover bare minimum, which is the requirement of government. Government is enforcing me or commanding me to cover that much. I have no problem. I don't say choice. My body, my choice. No, I have to cover that much because otherwise I will get penalized. Similarly, Islam, because obviously all our powers are taken from Allah and given to the state, that's why these issues are coming. In Islam we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have just expanded that morality. Instead of that minimum part, certain parts have to be covered because that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we don't have any choice. We'll be penalized in akhirah if we were going to do anything. So there is that element of choice argument which goes deep into the feminism in this. But at the same time, like all the men don't pray. Some men pray, some men don't. And I wish all of men would pray. But we don't live in an idealistic society. Even in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah says, Munafiqun, the heaviest salah on them was Fajr and Isha, because no one will recognize them. Similarly, I wish all the sisters will wear hijab, but we have to recognize the fact that not everyone is at the same level. So we have to remind our sisters lovingly, in a compassionate way, in a kind way, that take one step closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a non-judgmental environment, so that eventually they will come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I believe both internal and external change is important. That externally our appearance should change also, but internally our hearts should change. But it should be from internal to external, not the other way around. Our heart should love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that should reflect in our actions as well.
We have another question, that how should we answer to the feminists about the allowance for men to maintain 4 wives in Islam?
This is a big question. For detail, you can come in our fiqh of family class. But let's start with one by one. Allowing of 4 wives. First of all, I have 1 wife. I'm very happy, alhamdulillah. Just FYI. Okay. But I will try to defend the Islamic paradigm, okay? Not because I'm interested, just FYI. FYI. Okay, let's start. What's the problem with this? What's the morality problem with this? If you will ask morality, comes from equality. We already discussed equality. If you discuss about, no, men have this, woman doesn't have this, then what is the problem? Because once we identify what's the problem, then we can give a specific answer. Otherwise, I can speak about 10 hours, statistics said this, psychologically, biologically, sociologically, men have more sexual. We can talk about all those arguments, but if we cannot get the root cause, they will be problematic. So I don't know exactly what is the issue, but I will say this. Yes, in Islam, we allow, in Islamic legislation, allow men to have more than one wife as long as he can be just. And the number is maximum 4. In America, however, I'll just give the summary of this, and this is, by the way, we should not say that this is haram. This is mentioned in the Quran. We should not just change the Quran and Hadith because of intellectual trends. So if you are in, that's in Saudi or in Pakistan, I think it's permissible, or in Yemen, in these countries where it's permissible to practice polygamy, and you think you can do justice, and if both of you are fine, then who are we? And by the way, why should we have a problem as a feminist? Feminists have an argument of consent, right or wrong? Feminists have an argument that everything goes on with consent. If a woman, adult, consensual, becomes a second wife of an adult, consensual male, why feminists have an issue with that? It goes against their own logic. You allow men marrying men, you allow women marrying women, you allow premarital relationship, you allow your president having relationship, ex-president Bill Clinton sleeping with sister, not sleeping, he was away, with sister Monica, right? But can you imagine this? The hypocrisy that everything is okay regard bestiality in 4 different states. It's not prohibited. But when it comes to polygamy, all of a sudden we have the restriction. It's inconsistent with their own logic. But having said that, in America, I personally believe, and this is the fatwa of most of the scholars like Amja, they say in America, because of the legal system, we should not practice unless there is a case of zina. If it's case of zina, we will say, just have the wife because we don't want you to do zina. But in America, we would advise brothers not to do this because there is more harm because of the legal system. And eventually, from the experience also, the consequences are not very good in long term.
How do we explain the idea that Islam is perfect and people are not in regards to feminism, given that we live in the West where most people don't share our ideas?
Can you give me an example? How can you prove Islam is perfect, then what?
And that people are not in regards to feminism.
So basically you are talking to feminism. Feminism are bringing these emotional arguments about these different cases. This is just the logical, try to use logical, rational argument, because obviously if they are not believing in the Quran and Sunnah, that if you want to gauge anything, you will gauge with the proper practice of the earlier generation or the Prophet, or you will going to read the text and the scripture instead of looking at the modern Christians and gauging what Christianity is all about. So just see the Quran and Sunnah and the Prophet Muhammad's practice, you will to gauge and have the better idea of what Islam is. Otherwise, if a person wants to argue, they can bring whatever argument they can, and there is no way you can win the argument. Imam Shafi says you can never win the argument with the ignorant. You will always lose that argument. If he or she is there to argue, there is no point of arguing with that person.
We have one question here where a sister says, I absolutely hate wearing hijab and I want to take it off, but my mom advised me to still wear it, even if I hate it because it's better. What is your advice?
Okay. There are certain, first of all, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. I really appreciate you asking this question. I really do. I really appreciate you asking this question, inshallah ta'ala. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I request you, you should ask also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah open your heart towards the straight path, inshallah. Having said that, if your mom is asking you to wear hijab and you absolutely hate it, but you still do it, just apply the same analogy to something else and you will get your answers. Your mom is asking you not to change your gender and you absolutely hate, you want to change your gender. Your mom is asking you not to fall from the cliff and you absolutely hate, you want to kill yourself. we believe, just like we believe in this logic and rationale that by falling from the hill I'm going to kill myself. Similarly, we believe, just like our rational arguments, we believe in the arguments of Quran and Sunnah are also rock solid, right? So if at this point you cannot understand the wisdom of some of the arguments which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving, and you are choosing not to, I would still advise and recommend, just curb your choices, change your choices, try to curb your feelings and put your feelings according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and follow your parents. If they are asking you to wear the hijab, by asking to dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by consistently reading more about the entire hijab and modesty dynamics, hopefully inshallah you will going to start appreciating the beauty in the modesty. You know, subhanallah, I will tell you something, particularly this questioner. In 2014, I was in one of the masajid in the Northeast. One of the strangest shahada happened. One of the sister accepted Islam, and I asked her, why are you accepting Islam? She said, because of the hijab. Because of the hijab. She had 2 kids with her without marriage, and when she said, I want to accept Islam, the boyfriend left. So she had the responsibility, custody of the 2 kids. And she said, hijab is not only the piece of the cloth. Hijab gives me sense of protection and sense of connection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I don't have to seek attention of these bunch of clowns in my campus. I have to only seek attention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we see hijab, do not only see this external restraint. See hijab as connection between you and Allah. Sometime, even if you don't like, you have to fulfill your job what Allah is asking you. As a husband or wife, ask me, I have 3 kids. Sister Kanwal, you will appreciate this. If our kids scream, especially if they are toddlers, for no reason, and sometimes they do, we want to sleep. But if we think from a selfish approach, we would hate the motherhood, we would hate the fatherhood. But if you bring Allah into the picture, it is Allah who is asking me to take care of these kids. So I'm not doing this hijab or taking care of kids for myself. I'm doing this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want to make Him happy. Then hijab will be easy for you. Then prayers will be easy for you. Because at the end of the day, you are looking at your destination. You're not looking at any other men or to please them. So I hope inshallah this will help. And if you have more questions, inshallah, I'm here after the program, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah, just to conclude, ultimately, our program was called "Is Feminism Compatible with Islam?" And we hope that everyone comes to this similar conclusion, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated in the Quran and Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah 3. Today, I have perfected your religion for you and have completed my blessing upon you and chosen Islam as the mean, meaning complete way of life for you. So we don't need these man-made ideologies to give us rights and tell us how we should live our lives. We know that Allah is the one who knows what is good for us and what is bad for us. Who would know better than our Creator what is good for us and what is bad for us? And so, to kind of help navigate, the environment, you want to keep watch of what you consume, the media that you consume. Things like Hollywood, they put these principles there for you to subconsciously accept that, oh, this religion is oppressive to women, and this is the way for a woman to be liberated. As Dr. Asif was alluding right now, I am a mother of young children, and when people ask me, what am I doing? Meaning, like, what job do I have or something like that. If I say that I'm a stay-at-home mother and I take care of my kids, I'm made to feel because of the society that I'm less than, that I'm not a contributing member of society, I'm not a productive member of society, because that's my job right now, that I stay at home, I choose to stay at home and watch my kids and take care of them and do their tarbiyah. But we know that in Islam, that is something that is very much rewarded, that the status of the mother is so great. So when we talked about that one of the negative repercussions of the feminist movement is that motherhood is attacked. So these quote-unquote traditional gender roles, they're being attacked. And they say that, the woman should go out, she should work. And subhanAllah, again, Dr. Asif saying that it's been going on for 100 years and it has not made women happier. If you look at the studies, women are not happier right now, even though they're supposedly having so many more rights. There is even this phenomena in Gen Z, the latest generation right now, that women want to stay at home and they don't want to go in the workforce. And they're labeling it as this is a financial disaster because the current model just wants people to go into the work field and that leads to like neglect of the family and neglect of the home. So watch what you consume because what you are absorbing there is going to affect your worldview. If you're constantly absorbing things on social media and media with feminist leanings, that's how you're going to view things. That's how you're going to interpret certain hadith and say, oh, this means that Islam is oppressive to women and things like that. But if you view things through a lens of Islam and through the lens that Allah is our creator and He knows what's best for us, then you will appreciate the boundaries that Allah has delineated for all of us. And again, Allah says that He perfected the religion for us. And this was 1400 years ago. We don't need any alternative.